but the kid is the one who's going to actually tick the box. So doing something like this is saying that, OK, we will put in legislation that damages your bottom line, and I think it will force the hand, because they've said it's only 12 months and they will reevaluate it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good evening. You're watching State of the Nation on GB News right here with me, Matt Goodwin. We give the voice of the forgotten majority. The big news on tonight's show, as the Labour government fails the victims of grooming gangs in Oldham, another town that's been rocked by this hideous scandal. Tonight, I will be joined by Reform MP Rupert Lowe, who has grilled the Home Office on why there has not yet been a national inquiry. I will also be joined exclusively by former Rochdale Labour MP Simon Danchuk, who will be revealing the scale of the cover-up over the grooming gang scandal, how he was told not to talk about this emerging crisis because it would damage Labour's electoral chances. Meanwhile, Labour's migrant crisis strategy remains as hapless as ever. New powers are set to grant the National Crime Agency powers to ban smartphones from migrant smugglers. Will it make a difference? We'll be talking a bit about that. Plus, has yet more evidence emerged that our institutions have been captured by woke ideology? It has emerged that police forces are allowing transgender officers to use different warrant cards for different gender identities. That's State of the Nation. It's starting right now. Let's get into it. Now, I'll also be joined tonight by my panel, former Labour Party Special Advisor Paul Richards and former Conservative MP Daniel Kaczynski. As ever, let me know your views at gbnews.com/your say. Hit me up on X at GoodwinMJ. Right now, it's time for the News Bulletin with Sophia Wensler.
Matt, thank you very much. Unfortunately, you haven't got Sophia Wensler tonight with your news. It's me, Sam Francis. The top story will start in the United States, where the FBI says it now believes the man behind the deadly New Year's Day terror attack in New Orleans acted alone. Shamsuddin Jabbar, an Army veteran, killed 14 people and injured dozens more after driving his pickup truck into crowds. The 42-year-old, who was shot and killed by police, had posted online before the attack, pledging allegiance to the Islamic State group. The FBI says it is now reviewing hundreds of hours of surveillance footage and over 400 public tip-offs. The identities of the victims, including a former Princeton football star and an aspiring nurse, are still being confirmed. Elon Musk has ramped up his attacks on Sir Keir Starmer tonight amid growing pressure on the government over its handling of the grooming gang scandal. On social media, the tech billionaire suggested Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips deserves to be in prison. It comes after she insisted it was for Oldham Council alone to launch an investigation into child exploitation. Meanwhile, Tory leader Kemi Badenoch is calling for a full and national inquiry into the issue, saying justice for victims is long overdue. A group of 20 councillors has quit the party, 20 Labour councillors, that is, accusing Sir Keir Starmer of abandoning traditional party values. The group from Broxtowe Borough Council have formed a breakaway independence group with 100 members and a county councillor also leaving Labour. In response, the remaining Labour councillors in Broxtowe say they're extremely disappointed by the move, but have pledged to continue working for local residents. Suspected people smugglers could soon face travel bans, phone restrictions or social media blackouts under new government proposals. Ministers are introducing interim serious crime prevention orders to impose immediate restrictions while courts review full orders. The move follows a sharp rise in small boat crossings last year, with over 7,000 more migrants arriving than in the previous 12 months. Labour says the powers will tackle vile gang networks, but the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp told us earlier it won't make any difference. A murder inquiry is underway in London after a man injured in a Christmas Day car attack in the West End has died today. Aidan Chapman passed away on New Year's Eve after a car drove on the wrong side of Shaftesbury Avenue, hitting 4 pedestrians. The 25-year-old's parents say they are utterly devastated and described him as loving, kind and funny. A 30-year-old man has been charged with attempted murder, causing serious injury while disqualified from driving and possession of a knife. Police are now urging witnesses or anyone with footage of the incident to come forward. And it wouldn't be a news bulletin without some weather towards the end, and the UK is bracing for a blast of Arctic air with cold weather alerts across England and snow forecast for much of the country this weekend. Met Office warnings for snow and ice span England, Wales and Scotland, with Saturday expected to be the coldest as temperatures plunge below freezing, and severe snowfall could bring up to 40 centimetres in higher areas, causing potential travel chaos and possible power cuts. That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you at 9 o'clock for another roundup. Now, though, it's over to Matt.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, this is the scandal that has been dominating social media over the last few days. I'm, of course, talking about the grooming gang scandal, or as I call it, the rape gang scandal. As I discussed yesterday with former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, looking at the latest revelations to come from places like Oxford, we now need a national inquiry about this crisis. The real question everybody out there is currently asking themselves, as I asked the former Home Secretary, is why haven't more heads rolled? Why haven't more people in the establishment been held responsible for this horrific scandal? As GB News' very own Charlie Peters has pointed out, no police officer or government employee has ever been imprisoned for their gross misconduct in dealing with the grooming gang's horror. The grim reality is that for too many people in positions of power, they have ignored this scandal for too long, and they have avoided telling people the truth. Now, I'll be speaking tonight to former Rochdale MP Simon Danczuk about his first-hand experience of that in a moment. But first, just think, who could forget the time that Labour MP Naz Shah liked and retweeted a Twitter post that said those abused girls in Rotherham and elsewhere just need to shut their mouths for the good of diversity, before later claiming it was an accident. And who could forget how the few brave people, courageous people who have dared to speak the truth about this scandal, who have spoken up on behalf of those children, have often then been vilified as an assortment of Islamophobes or far-right agitators. The grooming gang scandal is the greatest stain on our national record, and that's why today I asked Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips onto the programme to discuss this scandal. And guess what? I didn't hear back. I didn't hear anything. Jess Phillips is normally an outspoken feminist. She talks endlessly about protecting women and girls from misogyny and abuse. But when it comes to the issue of the grooming gangs, when it comes to defending women and girls from predominantly Muslim Pakistani gangs, she seems to be completely silent. She has also rejected Oldham Council's request for a national inquiry, claiming it is for Oldham Council alone to decide how to deal with this. It is not the case for a national inquiry is not needed. But the Labour Party has established nearly 70 reviews and inquiries since taking office. So why the general disinterest when it comes to the issue of the grooming gangs? Well, one explanation, I would suggest, might be this. Labour is simply worried about alienating and losing the Muslim vote. Take the former Shadow Paymaster General, Jonathan Ashworth, one of the Labour Party's foremost frontbench spokespersons during the general election campaign back in July. Well, he unexpectedly lost his seat to Gaza independent Shaukat Adam. Indeed, the independent Gaza MPs were elected at the last election, causing a lot of chaos in Labour-held seats. But even the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, secured a majority of just a few hundred votes because of that strong Gaza vote in his constituency. And the minister who made this decision, Jess Phillips, nearly lost her seat to a Gaza independent too, securing a majority of just a few hundred votes. So could the fundamental threat that is actually posing the Labour Party in these heavily Muslim seats be the reason behind Labour's reluctance to treat the grooming gang scandal with the attention that it really deserves? Well, either way, let me say this, because so few people in the corridors of power appear willing to say it. What we need in this country is a national inquiry to name and shame the complicit public officials in councils, the police and the legal system. And we need to start deporting all those foreign nationals who have dual citizenship, removing them from the country. That's my view. What's yours? Let me know at gbnews.com/your say, or tweet me at GoodwinMJ. But right now, I'm joined by Reform MP Rupert Lowe, who has been campaigning, I think it's fair to say, in recent weeks and months for the government, for the state to release data and information about mass immigration. But he's now turning his attention to this issue to ask the Home Office a series of pressing questions. Rupert, if I may, what is it about this scandal, this grooming gang scandal, this rape gang scandal, that you find most alarming?
Well, I'm glad you said rape gangs, Matt, because I think that's what they are. And I don't think there's any point in beating around the bush. You've got to call things what they are, and I think they are rape gangs rather than grooming gangs. And I saw J.K. Rowling agreed with me on Twitter today, which is great. So my view on this, it was triggered really by just reading some transcripts as a result, I think, of Fraser Nelson's article last week. And we did a tweet on the back of that. And that seems to have gone completely viral.
And just to be clear, Rupert, this was an article by Fraser Nelson saying that we do not have any problems with integration in Britain. Just to be clear about that, that Britain is integrated.
Indeed. But these are transcripts of they're quite old court cases. But again, I as you know, Matt, I'm new to Parliament, and I think one of the reasons why these things are now breaking is because you've got 5 MPs who are from outside the two-party system. You know, the Blues and the Reds. We've equally got Twitter now controlled by a libertarian in the form of Elon Musk, and as you quite rightly say, he's been tweeting about this quite aggressively and very, very fairly today. So I think the key here is, like all of the things I've been trying to do, this alerted my attention to the fact that this is another example of government which is not transparent, of issues that have not been transparently brought to the fore, which involves vulnerable young white women. And it is, I think, also, it involves power. It involves, the block voting. As you quite rightly said in your introduction, it involves a lot of Labour. There's a lot of Labour running through this. I think there's a lot of questions to be answered by the judiciary. I think there's a lot of questions to be answered by the police. I think we should have a national inquiry. And it was interesting that all the Tories have jumped in on the back of what I've been doing today. And, they've had plenty of chance to do something about this. They've been in power for 14 years, and they haven't picked it up and run with it. Equally, Labour don't show any signs of it. As you say, Jess Phillips is ducking the issue at the moment, which is disgraceful. So my view is quite simply, we should have a national inquiry. It should be totally transparent. It should be available to the public. Those people who are foreign nationals who've raped young white girls should be immediately deported. Those people with dual nationality should have their British citizenship stripped and they should be deported. Any family members who've been involved in this knowingly should be deported if they're foreign. If they're British, if they are a government official, if they're from the police, if they're from the judiciary, I don't care. Everybody should be treated equally under the law. They should all have the full force of the law brought down on their heads.
Great, Rupert, thank you.
Matt, this is a disgraceful example of right and wrong.
Yeah.
There's no grey in this. This is black or white.
Absolutely.
It's right or wrong, and we need this to be absolutely, like the post office, like a lot of other things that need to be sorted out. This needs to be absolutely dealt with in a transparent and clinical way.
Well, Rupert, just let me pick up on that post office point. I don't think anybody viewing this would disagree with that point. This is fundamentally about evil. I don't even think this is about criminality. Having viewed the court transcripts, it goes way beyond criminality. This is evil, as close to evil as I've ever seen in my lifetime. So national inquiry, yes, agree with you. deporting foreign nationals with dual citizenship. We should be using the foreign aid budget. We should be using the visa programs to apply pressure on the likes of Pakistan to take these guys back. I mean, are you saying basically then that Reform are going to be making this a big issue in the year ahead? Is this going to be part of your pitch to the country?
Well, as you've probably seen, I've posted on Twitter. We've asked, I think, with 16 questions gone in today to the Home Office. We put them on Twitter. They're pretty clinical. In the same way that we've asked questions about almost every aspect of government. And I have to tell you that almost every stone I turn up, I find a cowpat underneath riddled with maggots. So, look, I mean, we need some proper government, Matt. And I think we need ministers who are capable of holding the civil service to account. We need people who are not frightened. And the job of an MP, the job of government is to govern. And it's to hold people to account, and it's to ask difficult questions. It's to actually raise issues that are in the interest of the British people. And the more I sit in Parliament at the age of 67, having worked like a lot of other good English people have worked their way, they pay their taxes, they assume everybody in Parliament knows more than they do and is better qualified than they are. Let me tell you, Matt, they very definitely aren't.
Yeah,
and for all those people who think they're being governed by an elite, they're not. And it's up to the electorate through the ballot box at the next ballot. They need to send a very, very strong message to Westminster, to the civil service, to the government, to the judiciary, to the police. They've had enough, and they're going to change the way in which we govern by electing a government from outside the existing structures.
Thank you, Rupert Lowe. Thank you for your time. We're all enjoying watching you on Twitter and X. Paul Richards, former Labour Party advisor, if I can come to you. I mean, Rupert Lowe there basically saying Reform are going to go guns blazing against the two big parties because they haven't dealt with this issue, they've ignored it, and when people have talked about it, they've called them a racist.
Well, they see this as a sort of wedge issue, don't they? I think it's playing politics with quite a serious issue, but they see they want to make hay with it. Well, that's their right, and they've got a few MPs to do that. But I think Jess Phillips has made the right call on this, Matt. I think it's a difficult call. I mean, it is a difficult, nuanced decision. But I think
what's difficult? Which bit's difficult?
Well, because I think the criticisms you get for saying Oldham should lead the inquiries to say, why isn't there a national inquiry, which is what we've been hearing all day. But I think actually having an inquiry at that level, closest to the communities affected, closest particularly to the victims and their families, is the right level to do it. And I think the government will give it its full support, and we should get the answers that we need. But I think it's perfectly reasonable for Oldham Council itself to lead that inquiry, which is why
we could have a local inquiry about Oldham, but isn't the bigger issue here that actually this is systemic? It's affected more than 50 towns and cities. Charlie Peters, GBNews, has pointed out just how systemic it is. This is, we look at the post office scandal. It was treated as a national issue. It had a national debate. Now we're talking about children being abused, raped and harassed. Everyone out there is saying, why can't we have a fully resourced, serious, effective national inquiry that starts naming names and shaming people who did not address this issue?
You had the Shadow Home Secretary on earlier, Chris Philp, who gave you a list of all of the inquiries that have taken place over the last few years, and he was accurate in that, including the national inquiry that took place under the last government to look at all of this. And I don't think
very broad. That wasn't a dedicated.
It's not. I mean, with the post office
inquiry.
With the post office, it was information that came out that people didn't know. We know what's happened here. We do know the full extent of the horror. And
I don't think we do. I don't think we know just how big this cover-up goes. I mean, let me ask you a different question. Do you think people in the Labour Party feel a sense of shame about this issue?
Well, I think anyone who thinks that they should just view it electorally should feel shame. So the idea that you don't or do things because of it may affecting votes, I mean, that is a shameful thing. Keir Starmer has said the political correctness should have nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
It has to be the law and justice and support for the victims have to be the most important thing. So I would definitely concede that.
Well, let's turn over to Daniel Kaczynski. I mean, your view from the Conservative side. Conservatives have also rejected this Oldham inquiry. We learnt that today, that the previous Conservative administration said it didn't support an inquiry into Oldham. But now we see Conservative ministers coming out saying, well, they want a national inquiry. We've got people like Robert Jenrick and others saying they want to see a national inquiry. I mean, the reality, though, is that both of the big parties have basically been caught out by Reform on this, isn't it? I mean, they both have failed to get their arms around this grooming gang scandal.
Well, when I represented Shrewsbury in Shropshire for 19 years, next door to us, Telford was another example, and I paid tribute to my former colleague Lucy Allen, the former Conservative MP for Telford. She tried to raise this issue assiduously on the floor of the House of Commons. Given the fact that 50 communities around the United Kingdom have been affected, and given the fact that there's very little in our lives which is more sensitive than children being abused, sexually abused, I think it's wrong that both parties have failed to have a national inquiry because councils are overstretched themselves financially. They don't perhaps have the legal resources that they might or ought to have, and there should be a national inquiry funded by the national government to try to get to grips with why is it that so many police officers, members of the judiciary, social workers, council workers have failed to spot these telltale signs of abuse of our children.
So if you support a national inquiry, would you also support deporting dual nationals, people who might be, for example, citizen of the UK but also Pakistan, and if they're convicted here, they should basically be deported?
Well, I can see why that sort of sentiment will be very popular, increasingly popular, if this sort of... I think we'd have trouble with the courts as things stand at the moment, but the law may have to be changed in order to convince the courts to allow that to happen. But if this activity continues unchecked, and if we get more and more stories like this coming to the fore, then of course there's going to be a groundswell of opinion of taking passports away from these people.
Can I ask you the same question?
Yeah,
would you support deporting dual nationals convicted of grooming gang crimes?
But that's not how British law works. If somebody is...
The principle, we have a party
I don't think we should change the law to allow that. I think people should be banged up in this country for those crimes, those horrific crimes. I mean, the Tories all piling in today saying, let's have an inquiry. They were in government for 14 years, you know, and maybe at that point they could have done this. So it's a bit rich, is it not, for people, particularly those who had actually been in government, to suddenly today announce this. And I do wonder if it is a response to reform more than anything else.
Interesting that both sounding ambiguous on that. Of course, that was in the Reform Manifesto at the last general election, deporting dual nationals convicted of grooming gang crimes. Now, in a statement tonight, the Labour Party has told us that child sexual abuse and exploitation are the most horrendous crimes, and the Home Office supports police investigations and independent inquiries to get truth and justice for victims. We have supported both the national overarching inquiry into child abuse, which reported in 2022, and local independent inquiries and reviews, including in Telford, Rotherham and Greater Manchester. Labour, in opposition, called for and supported the national inquiry into child sexual abuse under Professor Alexis Jay, which concluded in 2022. The Labour government is now working at pace to implement the recommendations, including introducing the duty to report. Thank you to my panel for now. We will hear more from them in a second. Now, after the break, a former Labour MP speaks out about the alleged cover-up of grooming gangs in his area. Simon Danchuk joins us on State of the Nation in a moment with some truly shocking revelations. See you shortly.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
What it's so funny the Times did this story, because I was on the train yesterday trying to do some work and connecting to the Wi-Fi, and it happens all the time. It just doesn't work. It's pathetic. And then I opened the Times and they've done a massive investigation. Loads of different rail routes from north to south.
Was that the James Bond thing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, that passenger got through, or almost got through, one episode one James Bond movie in 8 hours.
But you know, it's interesting. We call it train Wi-Fi, but it isn't. It's just really a SIM card on a train, really. So if your own phone's not going to get signal, why would we assume that the train's going to have signal? It just doesn't work like that. Unless you're in Japan or South Korea, whose infrastructure is infinitely better than ours, you're just not going to get signal. You have to download those films way before you get on
There is technology that can help with that. You know, there really is. If they found ways to put it underground, they can get it on ground and get you going. I definitely think, you know, with the price that we're paying paying for these tickets, they can get the Wi-Fi going. There is technology.
That's why it's so frustrating, isn't
Call
it?
Elon, get a Starlink. Let's go.
If you're a passenger paying hundreds of pounds for a season ticket or whatever you call it, and you commute to work every single day, and you're paying all this money, and you can't.
It's so
get
expensive.
Wi-Fi.
You'd expect Wi-Fi at the basic. Yeah, exactly.
But it happens with phone signal as well. I'll be walking down London in Park Lane or somewhere else, or down on the south coast. I just don't have phone signal, and I think to myself, what on earth is going on?
Doesn't it feel like 5G's made it worse though?
Yeah.
Because I feel like 4G, that didn't happen so much, but 5G just feels like...
Yeah, and then I always get this little E in the top corner of my phone, and I don't get any signal. I think it's got worse over the past couple of years. Yeah, especially with 5G. I agree with that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, where we are discussing the grooming gang scandal. Your views. Helen has written in and says Charlie Peters and Maggie Oliver are heroes for exposing the rape gangs across the country. It is obvious why Labour won't touch it. Andy says, surely we can't deport people if they are British citizens, Matt. Well, I think we can. Let's turn to Simon Danchuk, the former Labour MP for Rochdale, who has essentially seen this cover-up firsthand. And there are people out there saying, has the establishment, have authorities been working overtime to try and distract us from this issue? Just tell us your experience.
Yeah, so I was the Member of Parliament from 2010 to 2017 in Rochdale, and it was in 2012 that the Rochdale grooming scandal broke. It was new to me. I wasn't from the area originally. And as soon as it broke, I called out the ethnicity and religious aspect to this abuse. I said that they were important factors in the abuse taking place. And then I campaigned for 3 years solid on child abuse issues, whether it be Cyril Smith, historic abuse, but also the grooming scandals that were occurring across the country. And I raised lots of issues in Parliament and elsewhere on those issues. So that's the context. But what surprised me more than anything, really, is that I had senior politicians tell me not to mention the ethnicity or religious bias of those perpetrators. So the first example...
Who was that?
So first instance was Jim Dobbin, who was the MP for Harewood and Middleton at the time.
Right.
And the perpetrators tended to come from Rochdale and the victims tended to live in Harewood and Middleton. These are two constituencies co-terminus
I know
with
the
Rochdale.
seat very well.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law lives there.
Yeah. And so the poor white working class girls were often from council estates in Harewood and Middleton. And he said to me at some function, because we attend the same functions, listen, don't mention the ethnicity, there's no advantage to it, it'll affect the Labour vote. And he was quite clear.
So they said that, it would affect the Labour vote?
He was quite clear about that. That was his advice to me. He was a much older MP. I'd been there for 2 years, I was very new, and he probably thought he was giving me some good advice. The second instance where this happened is more significant in my view, because it was Tony Lloyd, who was chair of the Parliamentary Labour Party. That's a very influential position within the Parliamentary Labour Party, there's no doubt about that. He was running to be police commissioner for Greater Manchester. This story broke and he came to see me because he wanted to comment on it, and it was on my patch, and he said the same thing. He said, listen, I don't believe ethnicity is an issue in all of this, and I'm going to make that clear when I raise it at Prime Minister's questions. He also and it's on the record. I mean, he made a speech in Parliament in 2012 where he said something very similar similar and drew comparisons with Jimmy Savile. Why, I do not know.
Can I ask you a question? When I showed the tweet earlier on by Labour MP Naz Shah, who said, oh, actually, it was an accident, I didn't mean to suggest that we should tell these young girls to shut up and we should basically, prioritise diversity. Yeah. Do you think things like that were an accident, or do you think this is actually a reflection of the Labour mentality about this issue?
It's the mentality. There's no doubt about that. I've been in Labour politics for decades, and this
you know the Labour Party?
I know the Labour Party exceptionally well. What I tell you about Jim Dobbin and about Tony Lloyd is absolutely accurate. And then the other surprise to me, having campaigned on this for 3 years solid, I met the Home Secretary on a number of occasions. She would phone me up at home, Theresa May. Theresa May. She would speak to me about these issues, child abuse issues. I went to a summit with David Cameron at 10 Downing Street. So over that 3 years, I worked with the Conservative Party, because it's not a party political issue. And yet, Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary, during that time, never spoke to me or asked me about my experiences in campaigning on this on any occasion.
So can I ask you a question? When I see people like Jess Phillips, Stella Creasy, who have talked endlessly about abuse against women and children at the hands of men, but seem to say nothing at all when it involves Pakistani Muslim gangs, or when you do voice it, they say, well, actually, that's a bit far right. What's going on there? What's this reflecting within the Labour Party? I mean, are these people genuinely not interested in this issue because they would rather prioritise, their Muslim constituents?
Well, they're playing politics with the issue, which I think is appalling. I just made that point that this is a cross-party issue. There shouldn't be any politics to it. Yeah, absolutely. But they're worried about losing votes. That is a mentality with it. I'm not saying every Labour MP, but a proportion of Labour MPs are concerned about losing votes.
And I know you might not know him too well, but what's your instinct, your political instinct, on where Keir Starmer is on this? Do you think he gets the strength of feeling out there in the country about this issue?
No, I think I've described him before, but he fits into this North London Labour elite, and they all have a similar view of how you do politics, which groups in society are right, who you should kowtow to, who you should listen to, who you shouldn't listen to.
Well, Simon Danchuk, it's great to have you with us, telling us that first-hand experience. So, Paul Richards, former Labour advisor, does that tally up with your experience of the Labour Party?
No, I'm not doubting my friend Simon's story. I'm sure that's exactly how it happened. But I think the motives behind that, I would dispute. And there's an aspect of what you said there, Simon, which I thought was perhaps the most interesting thing, is why were the girls routinely ignored, dismissed, told they were liars and all the rest of it? Not because of race, but because of gender, because of patriarchy, and the fact that the sort of male establishment just didn't listen to these young women because they were working class and because they were girls.
So you don't think Labour's overwhelming support among British Muslims has anything to do with it? The fact that about 90% of British Muslims vote for Labour? The fact that some of those Labour ministers, like Jess Phillips, who almost lost their seat because of defecting Muslim votes. I just want to show you a quick clip, actually, by Jess Phillips. So we can show the folks at home this clip.
We're a year on from the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. Years and years worth of evidence. Rishi Sunak is doing nothing. And today, exactly what happened in Rochdale is happening in every single part of our country.
Well, that was a clip by Jess Phillips before she was in government, I should say. But now in government is refusing to push ahead with this inquiry in Oldham, and so far as resisting the calls for a full-blown national inquiry.
Well, hang on. She is having an inquiry in Oldham. She is having it. That's what she announced today. So there will be an inquiry in Oldham, led by Oldham.
But not supported by the national government and not endorsing a national inquiry. Daniel, there's a risk here, isn't there, for the big parties, that this issue is going to become like the new post office scandal. This is going to become a big national debate about how on earth we allowed this systemic exploitation of children to take place.
Well, my experience I don't know Simon Demchuk very well particularly, but he was a colleague for 7 years. He certainly came across as somebody with integrity and probity in my time working as a colleague with him. He's made some very serious allegations this evening about 2 colleagues. And if those can be substantiated, then I think the Labour Party has to answer for those. There is nothing worse, I would argue, than a politician trying to somehow kowtow to a minority group for fear of losing their support. If that is true, and I have no reason to doubt what Mr. Demchuk is saying, then I think it's a scandal, very serious scandal for the Labour Party.
Well, we should say at this point we have reached out to the Labour Party for comment regarding the claims made by Simon Danczuk, former Labour MP, of course, and we await their reply. In a moment, we will be looking at the Labour government's latest move to try and tackle the small boats crisis. It's not going away, it's getting worse. Come back in a few minutes and we'll get into all of that stuff. Bye-bye.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Another cold one out there this evening. It's going to be a hard frost by morning across much of the country. Further snow coming in across northern Scotland. Strong winds means blizzards as the snow peppers through the Northern Isles. Easing for a time here, but spreading down into the mainland of Scotland. We could see several centimetres in some places. And with the showers further west and temperatures tumbling, that may well lead to some icy conditions for Western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England. Largely dry for England and Wales. Clear skies means it will be a cold start to Friday. The strong winds really blowing in the showers over northern Scotland through the night and still into the morning. So a Met Office snow and ice warning in place here, say several centimetres in some locations. Further west, it's more rain at low levels that we'll see, but with temperatures close to freezing, it could be icy over western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, even into northwest England as the showers come in here. Elsewhere, it's a frosty but generally sunny start to Friday. As we go through the day, I think we'll see the snow showers easing a little bit. A mixture of rain and sleet showers coming into Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, northwest England. Still some snow flurries coming into northeastern parts of Scotland. Still very windy here as well. That wind really bringing a chill. A few scattered showers for North Wales, but a good chunk of the Midlands, South Wales, southern England, eastern England staying dry. Feeling cold though, particularly in that wind in the east. Temperatures in single figures. Another frosty night on Friday night. Again, potentially quite icy on Saturday morning. Again, a good chunk of the country looking dry and fine, but a change down to the southwest weather system moving in. That'll bring some rain initially, but as this weather system hits the colder air, we could see some heavy snow for a time on Saturday. Probably not lasting too long across the south, but as it spreads into the Midlands, Wales, northern England, parts of Scotland, that snow could really build up as we head into Sunday. Freezing rain is an extra hazard as well, something to keep an eye on this weekend.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, Keir Starmer came to power in July promising to smash the gangs. But the only thing he's really been smashing is the British people's sense of fair play over illegal migration. In what is a later sign that Labour's illegal migration strategy equates to rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, today it emerged that the government is set to grant the National Crime Agency special powers to ban smartphones from migrant smugglers before enough evidence has emerged to prosecute them. Will this make any difference at all? Well, I'm back with my panel, former Labour advisor Paul Richards and Conservative MP Daniel Kaczynski. Now, Paul, I mean, there is clearly a problem here for the Labour Party. The small boat numbers, as we've seen this week, are going up and up. It doesn't appear that Labour is, in fact, smashing the gangs. We've also had new polling today showing that 70% of Brits think that immigration is too high, and only 18%, a record low, think immigration has been mostly good for the country. So this issue is potentially going to really cause an enormous problem for Keir Starmer in 2025, is it not?
Well, there are two different issues. One is the small boats crisis.
Illegal migration.
I welcome this idea of trying to disrupt the gangs' communications. We know these gangs are very sophisticated. We know they're placing order for the boats in Europe and shipping the boats across the European mainland before they get anywhere near the sea, and then taking their phones away before.
Desperate stuff, though, isn't it, Paul?
It's not, because I think it solves it upstream. It means that we can disrupt the gangs before having to go through a legal process, and actually trying to do it sooner rather than later is a good idea. The second issue, people's view of immigration more generally, is something that all governments have to address. But I mean, most of the people polled in this poll, won't be directly affected by it. It'll be just through things that they've read in the papers and seen on television.
The theory being that if you personally experience immigration, you become more positive about it.
Well, I think where people live in cities that are integrated, that are diverse, where you can go and get a cappuccino. Well, London, for example.
I don't think London's particularly integrated.
I think it's an incredibly diverse city.
But over the last year, we've had very clear evidence of sectarianism, haven't we?
Well, that's wrong, and where people are not integrated, they should learn the language and they should take part in British traditions. But I welcome things like the Notting Hill Carnival. I like the fact that New Malden's full of people from Korea. I like the Edgware Road with its people smoking shisha pipes. I like being able to go to Chinatown. That is London's strength. And, by the way, always has been since the Romans arrived.
Yeah, interesting. my view of the Notting Hill Carnival is somewhat different. But, Daniel, the issue of the small boats, I mean, this was obviously brewing under the previous Conservative government, started in 2018. There's an issue here, isn't there? We've got more than 150,000 illegal migrants coming in over the last 6 years. The British people watching this show deserve respect, deserve to be treated with honesty and decency. They're paying £5.4 billion a year as taxpayers towards this broken asylum system. How are we going to solve this? How are we going to get to the bottom of this crisis?
Well, I mean, taking their mobile phones off these people smugglers is a sticking plaster, of course.
It's a start, though.
It's a gimmick.
It's a start.
Well, it's a sticking plaster. It's a gimmick. The real culprit here, actually, in reality, is the European Union and their fixation with destroying all borders on our continent. They wanted this concept of the free movement of people. Everybody should have the right to transverse this continent without any checks, without any sniffer dogs at a border post, without any customs officers. Just go across that border. You're entitled to go anywhere you like. So their fixation with creating this supranational state has destroyed all of those borders. An illegal migrant coming from Turkey, let's say Syria, across the border into Bulgaria, would normally, historically, have had to have crossed 7 or 8 national frontiers with a border guard, with sniffer dogs, with cameras, all the rest of it. The European Union has trashed all of that, so it has facilitated and empowered criminal gangs to smuggle drugs across our continent and to smuggle people. And they have threatened us on many occasions with legal action. I've just wished the Labour government would threaten them with legal action, because it is their lack of ability to police their external frontiers, whether it's the Italian coastline or whether it's Spain and Morocco, which then allows those illegal migrants into Europe, and then a funnel has been created for them to come to the United Kingdom.
I mean, what happens here, Paul, to the Labour government if actually Keir Starmer does not get his arms around this crisis? Because, I sort of take issue with, the phones. I mean, we've had 50 years of smashing the gangs in the drug trade. Hasn't made a blind bit of difference. Taking mobile phones away from the cartel bosses wouldn't have made any difference. We don't have an active deterrent. Rwanda's gone. And if anything, if you do arrive in Britain illegally, you get a cash card, a smartphone, a place on the NHS, a free place in school, you get a hotel room, accommodation. I mean, we're a soft touch. The French say we're a soft touch. I mean, when is the Labour government going to get real about dealing with this crisis in a serious, grown-up way?
I think today's announcement is part of a bigger package, and I think taking phones off it sounds trite, but you are disrupting the business, and you are not allowing them to communicate, place orders for the boats, to put on TikTok their adverts for people to come to the UK. All of the things that we know that are actually being used.
You just get another phone from the local market.
Well, then you keep doing it until they can't operate.
Until we run out of phones.
Until they can't operate as a business, and you smash the business in that way.
So what we're playing is a national game of whack-a-mole. We remove one gang, and then there's another gang that pops up.
Well, that's how you smash a gang, isn't it? Is you stop people from doing it and you put those people in prison so that there's nobody drowning out at sea. I don't blame the poor souls on the boats. I blame the scumbags that put them in the boats in the first place. And that's who we're going after with this policy.
Well, let's see if indeed the Labour plan works. Thank you to my panel. Now, in a moment, we're going to be looking at the latest evidence that suggests our policing institutions have been captured by woke ideology. See you in a few minutes.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello, here's your latest winter sun forecast for GB News. Over the next few days, things will be turning more unsettled across southern parts of Europe. We'll see a few showers across the Canary Islands and Madeira on Friday, some sunshine too. Sunshine for southern parts of Spain, rain further north, and as we head into central and southeastern parts of Europe, much more in the way of unsettled weather here. Plenty of rain around, some snow on the hills, and temperatures will be struggling in places too. As for the next few days into the weekend and the start of next week, we hold on to that mixed theme, plenty of sunshine but further showers at times as well.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
I'm joined with Ryan Mark Parsons, who's a TV personality, a columnist, and he was on The Apprentice a few years back, weren't you? That's where most people would recognise your face from. One of the youngest contenders ever on The Apprentice. How did that work out?
Well, you know what? I never in a million years thought I'd get on the show. I was 18 when I applied. There were about 6 months of auditions. It was intense. You met Lord Sugar's advisors, his lawyers, his business advisors. It was the most intense thing I've ever done. And I just thought, never in a million years am I going to get on the show as a teenager. And I got the call from the exec. And he was like, you're one of the 16 candidates. And it was just like, really? So I took a gap year. I've just finished my A-levels. I was working in Harrods before. And I just came up with this business idea, took it onto the show. And I got fired in the end. I lasted 8 weeks, which wasn't too bad. But
what was the business idea? Educate me.
A concierge, similar to companies like Velocity Black, quintessentially, that work with some of the private banks. It was similar to that. I was inspired by my time in Harrods, working with some of these ultra-high net worth clients. So I just wrote a 40-page business plan like we all have to do, but I didn't make it to the interview, so I didn't get to talk about it. But no, it was a great experience, a very tough experience, but unforgettable.
So at a young age, how did that change your life at that age? Because you must have got recognised, starting to be recognised when you're going out and about town.
Yeah, I mean, it happened quite quickly because the adverts start rolling out on BBC One and then the shows go on air. It's once a week on a Wednesday. You're getting about 7 million people tuning in every week.
Yep.
And yeah, it was surreal. It was surreal. And then suddenly you get invitations to things. You're going to premieres and it was a lot. It was a lot at a young age. And I obviously had no training for any of that. But I just embraced it and I've had fun with it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, this is a story for you. Before exercising certain powers, such as stop and search, police are required to show their warrant cards. And it's emerged following Freedom of Information requests that at least 11 police forces are issuing multiple warrant cards to transgender officers, depending on their various gender identities. The FOI requests also revealed that 2/3 of UK police forces allow male officers and civilian staff who identify as women to use women's showers, toilets and changing rooms. So is this the latest example of the capture of our public institutions by woke ideology. I'm joined by a real expert on this topic, Maya Forstater, co-founder of Sex Matters. Maya, what is going on in the police? What on earth is this telling us about the ideology at work in the public sector institutions?
This has been going on for a long time. Police forces have adopted policies from Stonewall. They've adopted policies to transition at work and allow officers, as you say, to have 2 warrant cards for a male officer to say that he's a woman and use women's changing rooms, women's showers, and to search detainees. So the law says that when you get searched by a police officer, anything more than just a very basic pat down has to be by an officer of the same sex. But police forces are saying, well, that doesn't mean their actual sex. It means whether they've got a gender recognition certificate or even just whether they identify as the opposite sex.
Right. And is anybody in the police force actually reading some of the findings from things like the Cass Review and other major investigations which have shown that actually a lot of this gender ideology that's infected our public sector institutions, not just the police, by the way, but also still parts of the NHS, universities and so on, actually isn't really based on any serious evidence?
I don't think they are. And also they're not learning the lessons from things like the Casey Review of the Metropolitan Police, you know, that nobody should be above scrutiny or beyond reproach. You know, that includes police officers. So, you know, it's not only the Cass Review, which is the medical evidence, but also the evidence that institutions can go wrong when you put any class of people outside of safeguarding and scrutiny. And that's what they're doing here.
So if I was playing devil's advocate for a minute, I mean, let me just give the view of some of the people apparently within the police service that this is actually just about being nice to people who identify in a certain way, and this is just about being nice to police officers who might choose to wake up tomorrow and identify as a woman or a man or as a cat or whatever. I mean, what's the problem with just being nice?
The police force isn't there to be nice to police officers. It's there to keep the public safe and to investigate crimes and to, you know, record evidence accurately. And you can't do any of that if you pretend that some men are women on some days or other or all of the time. Sex is just a really basic fact of life. And 98% of sex crimes are done by men. And so if you start pretending that some men are women, and if you also avoid saying that the reason why some men like to dress up as women is for a sexual fetish, you're ignoring not only the biggest risk, which is the risk of being male, but also the risk of someone having a sexual fetish and be enacting a paraphilia. And you say, well, let's be nice. Let's just call that person a woman. You can't keep people safe by being nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there is this debate coming out of America that we have reached and passed peak woke, that actually, if you look at the election of Donald Trump, you look at the things he's planning to do in the universities, in the deep state and so on, he's going to strip out all of this woke ideology stuff, and that actually it's going to look increasingly ridiculous. Do you think we've reached that point at the UK? Do you look at institutions like the police and other agencies, government departments, or do you think actually this fight is still very much going on? I mean, do you buy this notion that we've passed peak woke?
I think it's very embedded in the institutions, and getting it out is just going to take a lot of work, particularly if you don't have leadership from the top saying, look, this is just ridiculous. We have rules about men and women. We have rules to keep people safe. And we never meant to say that the law requires you to treat a man as a woman. And then if that's not coming down from the top, then it's not going to be removed. So you know, we may see that it's peak woke in the US, but that we're still going ahead at full steam.
It is absolutely remarkable that this stuff is being imposed on institutions by the very expert class that tells us to respect and trust the institutions. And now here we are being told that we should believe in these ideas. Maya, as always, thank you. Your work is incredibly important. Go check out Sex Matters, a really important organisation. Thank you for joining us this evening. Now, up next, Patrick Christys, tell us what you've got coming up.
Look, fantastic show, great panel, great guests, really well worth a watch every single minute of that. So thank you very much for that.
I'll give you the money later.
I'm going to be picking up a bit on the grooming gangs issue, obviously. I'm actually asking the question whether or not there is a cultural problem within aspects of the Muslim community when it comes to, well, child rape, right? That is a question that needs to be asked. When it comes to, for example, in Rotherham, 1 in every 73 Pakistani men was charged.
Absolutely crazy, isn't it?
It would imply that there is a problem there. Now, Elon Musk thinks Tommy Robinson's a political prisoner. Is that right? There was a farmer protest today. I'm going to speak with the organiser. Meghan Markle, something a bit different, has announced a new Netflix show, and we've got a video of it. So, yes, we'll bring that to you.
Oh, crikey, you tease. I'd like to see that. I just see her Instagram video that she released of her sort of wandering down a beach, and oh, God.
Yeah.
Too much time on her hands.
Isn't it?
Too much time on her hands. Splendid, Patrick. That's all coming up after the weather. I'll be back next week with State of the Nation. Matt Goodwin, as always, representing the forgotten majority. I will see you soon. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to the panel. See you on the other side. Bye-bye.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Another cold one out there this evening. Is going to be a hard frost by morning across much of the country. Further snow coming in across northern Scotland. Strong winds means blizzards as the snow peppers through the Northern Isles. Easing for a time here, but spreading down into the mainland of Scotland. We could see several centimetres in some places, and with the showers further west and temperatures tumbling, that may well lead to some icy conditions for western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England. Largely dry for England and Wales. Clear skies means it will be a cold start to Friday. The strong winds really blowing in the showers over northern Scotland through the night and still into the morning, so a Met Office snow and ice warning in place here, say several centimetres in some locations. Further west, it's more rain at low levels that we'll see, but with temperatures close to freezing, it could be icy over western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, even into northwest England as the showers come in here. Elsewhere, it's a frosty but generally sunny start to Friday. As we go through the day, I think we'll see the snow showers easing a little bit. A mixture of rain and sleet showers coming into Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, northwest England. Still some snow flurries coming into northeastern parts of Scotland. Still very windy here as well. And that wind really bringing a chill. A few scattered showers for North Wales, but a good chunk of the Midlands, South Wales, southern England, eastern England staying dry. Feeling cold though, particularly in that wind in the east. Temperatures in single figures. Another frosty night on Friday night. Again, potentially quite icy on Saturday morning. Again, a good chunk of the country looking dry and fine, but a change down to the southwest weather system moving in. That'll bring some rain initially, but as this weather system hits the colder air, we could see some heavy snow for a time on Saturday. Probably not lasting too long across the south, but as it spreads into the Midlands, Wales, northern England, parts of Scotland,